Most men find out about their wife's affair by accident. I found out because she emailed me by mistake. What I did next wasn't loud, but it changed everything. Hey everyone, appreciate you being here. I've got something real personal to share today, a story that still shakes me to my core. It's about betrayal, but not the kind that explodes in your face. No, this one crept in quietly and hit me like a punch to the gut when I least expected it. Most guys, when they find out their wife's been unfaithful, it's usually something dramatic. Coming home early to a scene they never forget, overhearing something suspicious, or stumbling across something they can't unsee. My experience wasn't like that. Mine came in the form of a single email. Plain, unassuming, and completely devastating. It wasn't even meant for me. That's what stung the most. I'm pretty sure it was just one of those mindless slip-ups that happen when you're multitasking. Maybe her email client autofilled my name when she typed the first few letters. Just one quick click without double-checking. Happens all the time, right? But this time it changed everything. We'd been married for 18 years. Nearly 2 decades of shared memories, raising kids, birthdays, holidays, the usual ups and downs. So when I saw an email from my wife, Laura, pop up in my inbox with the subject line, "About yesterday," I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, yesterday had just been a regular old Wednesday. Nothing special. Just work and the usual routine. Curious, I opened it, expecting maybe a sweet message or something she forgot to tell me. But what I read made my heart start pounding. She was going on about what an amazing time she'd had, how perfect the day was, and how excited she was for next week. She ended it with, "Yours always, your lady." I sat there frozen. Yesterday? I was at the office all day. As far as I knew, so was Laura. We hadn't even spoken during the day. She came home that evening acting like everything was completely normal, maybe even a little extra chipper now that I think about it. At the time, I just chalked it up to a good day. But now it was like someone had turned on a floodlight, and everything I thought I knew was washed in a harsh, unforgiving glow. My first reaction? I wanted to confront her right then and there. Just come out and ask her, who is he? What's going on? I felt this fire building up inside me, ready to explode. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear, maybe logic, maybe a bit of both. I knew if she realized her mistake, she might try to spin it, say it was a joke or meant for someone else, or worst of all, make me question my own sanity. So I decided to wait, to watch, to listen. The message mentioned looking forward to next week, so I figured I had a small window to see what might unfold. Laura worked in real estate, long hours, unpredictable schedule. It had always made sense, until now. That flexibility suddenly seemed like the perfect cover. That night I paid close attention to her, more than usual. She got home a little after I did. Her mood? Unshaken. Her smile? Still there. If she knew she'd made a mistake, she wasn't showing it. She didn't flinch. She didn't act nervous. It was like nothing had changed. So I did the same. I kept calm, acted normal, went through the motions. But inside, I was anything but okay. I barely slept that night, lying there next to her, staring at the ceiling. My mind racing with questions, with possibilities, with images I didn't want to see. I lay there that night, staring up at the ceiling, thoughts swirling endlessly. Sleep never came. Instead, I kept turning over every possible scenario in my head, trying to untangle the growing knot of suspicion, pain, and confusion. Was there any chance this was all just a misunderstanding? Could I have misread the email? Was it meant for someone else? Maybe a joke, a misfire, something innocent taken out of context? But another voice inside me whispered something I didn't want to hear. If that message was what it seemed to be, then the damage was already done. Either way, my marriage was standing on the edge of a cliff. And I couldn't move forward, not without the truth. By the time the sun came up, I'd made up my mind. I needed answers I couldn't find on my own. So that morning, I made the call and hired a private investigator. I figured if Laura hadn't done anything out of the ordinary on that Wednesday, at least I'd have some peace of mind. But if my gut feeling was right, then I needed proof, real, undeniable evidence. I wasn't going to make decisions based on doubt alone. Wednesday came again. She left the house dressed for work, just like always, and I watched her drive away. That night, she got back later than I did, walking through the door like nothing was off. Her smile? Still there. Her routine? Unchanged. I forced myself to stay calm, kept up the act, pretending like I hadn't seen the message that haunted me every second. The next day, Thursday, I met with the detective. I'll never forget the look in his eyes as he sat down across from me. He didn't need to say much. He had the look of someone who's delivered this kind of news before. And sure enough, he confirmed what I'd feared most. There were photographs. Laura had been seen at a roadside motel not far from the airport. She arrived there during what should have been her work hours, met up with a man, and the two of them entered a room together. Later they left hand in hand, completely at ease with one another. Like this wasn't a new thing. The detective just nodded when I asked how often he saw this. "More than you'd think," he said. "Still doesn't make it easier." I just sat there in silence, trying to breathe through the weight crushing my chest. After a long pause, I looked him in the eye and said, "I'm gonna need your help again." If that motel was their usual place, I needed more than just photos. I wanted something that couldn't be explained away. I needed proof that even she couldn't deny. He told me it was possible. With the right incentive, the motel manager might be willing to grant access to security footage. Or, with some luck, even let them plant a hidden camera in the room. I didn't hesitate. I gave the green light. I went back to my office afterward, sat at my desk, and tried to get back to work like nothing had happened. But I couldn't focus. I couldn't think. Now that doubt had been replaced with certainty, my mind was spiraling. Every thought, every memory, every word we'd shared, it all came rushing back, twisted through the lens of betrayal. And then, something hit me that felt even worse than everything else. I knew him. I knew the man. Mark Bradshaw. Not just some stranger. Not some guy from her work or a face I didn't recognize. No, Mark was our neighbor. Our friend. That name, his name, clicked with the email. It made horrible, perfect sense. When Laura started typing Mark, our shared last name, McBishop, must have auto-filled in the to field. She had been in such a rush, so caught up in her feelings, that she didn't even catch her mistake. I remember just sitting there, my hands shaking as I processed it. Mark and his wife, Bobby, had been in our lives for years. We'd shared dinners, holidays, weekend getaways. We went to the movies together, backyard barbecues, game nights with the kids. They were part of our circle. Part of our story. And now, he was part of the lie. Looking back, I can't say I ever noticed anything between them. No lingering glances, no awkward moments, nothing that would have made me think twice. Was I just completely blind? Or were they both simply that skilled at keeping their secret buried deep beneath the surface? Either way, it didn't matter anymore. The truth was out now and it burned. The kind of pain that hits you in the chest and doesn't let go. But I told myself I couldn't afford to fall apart. I couldn't let the hurt freeze me in place. I needed to move, needed a plan. So I sat with it for hours, locked in my own head, weighing every possible move. Part of me wanted to blow everything up, expose them for what they'd done, make them face the humiliation they deserved. Another part of me? As hard as it is to admit, I actually pictured begging Laura to stay. Trying to save what we'd built. Those thoughts made me feel weak, desperate. My mind kept pinging back and forth between outrage and self-loathing, spiraling deeper by the minute. But eventually, through that storm of emotion, something solid took shape. A strategy. Not just revenge but precision. I wasn't going to act out of rage. I was going to be smart about this. I decided on a two-pronged approach, divide and conquer. First, I had to drive a wedge between them, expose the weak spots, stir up doubt, and chip away at whatever fantasy they were building together. If I could break their bond before it took stronger root, maybe I could stop this before it became permanent. Second, I'd work on winning Laura back, not with desperation but by making her see clearly what she was throwing away. I wanted her to feel the weight of that decision. So I got to work. I started by purchasing a small home recording system and installed it on our landline. Then I placed a voice-activated recorder inside her car, hidden but close enough to pick up her conversations. I figured she likely spoke to Mark while driving, assuming no one else could hear her. I couldn't tap her cell phone legally, but I could listen to the conversations that happened in what she thought was a private space. Then I turned to her email. Laura often checked her work messages from our shared desktop computer, and I knew where she kept her passwords. I'd helped her set most of them up. Within a few minutes, I had full access, and I set up auto-forwarding on anything coming in or going out. Their messages told me everything I needed to know. The affair was still new, still wrapped in that intoxicating glow of secrecy and lust. But it also meant it was fragile, delicate enough to break with the right push. Not long after, a new email came through. It was simple but telling. "Are we still on for Wednesday?" "Absolutely. One time. One place. Can't wait." That was all I needed. Wednesday rolled around. I drove to Laura's office and waited nearby in my car. I knew her lunch break schedule. Once I saw her return to the parking lot, I casually followed from a distance. Then when no one was watching, I made my move. I let a little air out of her back tire, not enough to damage it, just enough to leave her stranded. It was subtle, quiet, calculated. And it worked. I drove away, watching her car shrink in my rearview mirror. A small smirk crept across my face, the first one in days. I couldn't help but wonder what she'd do now, with no car and no time to find another way to meet Mark. Sure enough, 20 minutes before she was supposed to meet him at that same motel, my phone rang. It was her. She was stuck. And she needed my help. I told her not to worry, kept my voice calm and reassuring. I mentioned that work was slow that day and that I had time to come by and help with the car. I said I just needed to wrap up one quick thing before heading over. That one thing didn't exist. I intentionally waited, let a full 15 minutes pass before I even got in the car. My goal was to time it perfectly, to arrive just when she should have been pulling into that motel parking lot with Mark. When I finally pulled up, there she was, standing next to her car, clearly agitated. She kept checking her watch, pacing a little, arms crossed. The impatience was all over her face. I got out, gave her an apologetic smile, and said the job I was finishing ran longer than expected. She didn't say much, just sighed in frustration. As she shifted from foot to foot, trying to mask her irritation, I went about the tire change. Slowly. Carefully. I worked each lug nut like I had all the time in the world. I parked my car just behind hers, on purpose, so there was no way she could back out and leave until I was finished. By the time I'd replaced the flat tire, put the old one in the trunk, and washed the grease off my hands with the rag I kept in the car, well over an hour had passed since her rendezvous was supposed to begin. I apologized again, playing the part of the caring husband. I said I hoped my delay didn't cause her to miss anything important. She let out a frustrated breath and muttered, "He'll just have to understand." I'd noticed her phone vibrating a few times while I worked. Each time she'd glance at the screen and then slide it back into her pocket without answering. I had a good feeling who it was, and why she didn't want to answer with me standing there. My suspicions were confirmed later that afternoon when I checked the forwarded emails from her inbox. Mark had been waiting at the motel, checking his watch, growing increasingly irritated. There were multiple messages from him, first concern, then confusion, and finally, annoyance. All because of a flat tire. Good, I thought, that's one crack in their perfect little world. That night, after dinner, I went out of my way to be warm, affectionate, even. We settled on the couch like old times. I gently took her feet and rested them on my lap, slowly working my thumbs into the soles of her feet. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my tone light. At first, she seemed unsure, like she was trying to read my intentions. But eventually she softened. Her head leaned back against the cushion, eyes closed, and a faint smile tugged at her lips. I waited a few more days before making my next move. Monday morning, I sent a huge bouquet of flowers to her office. Big, colorful, impossible to ignore. Attached was a note, "To the best wife a man could ever ask for." That evening she came home with the card in hand, smiling warmly. She hugged me, kissed my cheek, and thanked me for the surprise. "Everyone at the office was so jealous," she said, laughing. "You made their day." Curious indeed. When she asked what the occasion was, she gave me a curious look, pointing out that I'd never done anything like that before. I pulled her into a hug and simply said, "I just wanted to remind you how much you mean to me." Simple words. But they carried a weight I don't think she realized. From her emails, I already knew another meeting was on the horizon, just a few days away. But I also knew repeating the same tactic, tampering with her car, would raise too many questions. I needed to switch things up. So I let her go. I let her think everything was normal, that she was in the clear. But I followed her. I stayed far enough back not to be seen, trailing her until she pulled into the familiar motel parking lot. Mark had apparently booked the room this time. I parked around the side, keeping a low profile, and slipped quietly through a side door. Then I pulled the fire alarm. After that, I stepped back outside and waited, keeping my distance. Within minutes, the whole building began to stir. Guests started pouring out, confused, annoyed, some wrapped in towels, others on their phones talking fast. It was chaos. I didn't see Laura or Mark among the crowd. But I knew they were in there, caught up in the disruption. I didn't need to see them to feel the satisfaction. Back at the office later that day, I logged into her email account again and read through the aftermath. Mark was livid. "What the hell? This is ridiculous," he wrote. "I'm so angry I could scream." She tried to calm him down. "Mark, I'm sorry. It's not my fault. Next time pick a place that won't be a fire hazard." That last line hit me hard, but not in the way she meant it to. I actually smiled. Yes, I thought. That sounds like your end. A fire hazard indeed. That night, Laura came home visibly tense. Her shoulders were stiff, her eyes a little tired. But the moment she stepped into the dining room and saw the table set, candles flickering, the scent of her favorite meal drifting through the air, her whole body shifted. She stopped in her tracks, half laughing in disbelief. "What is all this?" "I called your office earlier," I said smoothly, "and found out your client meeting got delayed. Figured you'd be tired and I didn't want you to worry about cooking." For the briefest moment, her smile faltered. Just a flicker. But she quickly caught herself, stepped into character, and gave me that practiced, warm expression. "That's so sweet of you, darling," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "You treat me so well." Later, as I did the dishes, I could feel her watching me from the hallway. Something in her gaze had changed. Maybe she was starting to feel guilty. Maybe she was questioning everything. I didn't know yet. But what I did know was that my plan was working. Still, Mark wasn't ready to give up. His next message made that crystal clear. He was pushing for another try. This time he proposed a meeting at the Hyatt Hotel, noon a few days from now. And just like that, the next piece of the game fell into place. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called the Hyatt, using a calm, confident voice as I identified myself as Mark Bradshaw. "I need to cancel my reservation," I told the clerk. Without hesitation, she confirmed the cancellation and thanked me, mentioning how grateful they were, given that a major conference had overbooked the entire hotel. Perfect, I thought. One less thing for them to hide behind. The following day, I arrived early at the Hyatt and settled into a quiet corner of the lobby, hidden behind a newspaper. I chose my seat strategically, close enough to observe but far enough to stay unnoticed. It wasn't long before they showed up. Laura and Mark walked in together, arms close, smiles soft and intimate, until they reached the front desk. I watched it unfold in real time. Mark leaned in to speak with the clerk, but within seconds his expression shifted from surprise to anger. "What do you mean my reservation was cancelled?" he snapped, clearly thrown off. "I'm sorry, sir," the clerk replied politely, "but it was cancelled earlier today. And unfortunately, due to the convention, we're fully booked." Laura's entire face dropped. She spun on her heel, face flushed with frustration. "Forget it," she muttered. "Let's go." Mark tried to soothe her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder, but she was already storming toward the exit. He followed helplessly. I watched them leave through the glass doors, their little fantasy moment shattered. And as they disappeared into the street, I leaned back in my chair, folded the newspaper neatly, and allowed myself a small, quiet smile. My job here was done. That evening, when Laura returned home, I was already waiting at the door, ready to greet her with warmth. "We're going out tonight," I announced with a grin. She blinked in surprise. "Out? Where?" "It's a surprise," I said, guiding her to the car. As we drove, I turned on soft music, something familiar and calming. She studied me from the passenger seat, her gaze flickering with something unreadable. Suspicion? Curiosity? Maybe both. But she didn't ask any more questions. Then we pulled up to the Hyatt. I saw the color drain from her face the moment she recognized it. Her voice came out low, almost guarded. "Why are we here?" I just smiled, keeping my tone light. "You'll see." We walked into the hotel together, and I led her upstairs to the rooftop restaurant, their famous rotating dome offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. It was beautiful up there, even for someone who knew the real reason behind the visit. At the hostess stand, I gave my name. The waiter, polite and professional, nodded and guided us to a table with one of the best views in the house. Laura looked around, then back at me, visibly rattled. "How did you manage to get a table?" she asked. "There's a huge convention going on. Everything's booked." "It wasn't a problem," I replied smoothly. "I called earlier today and reserved it." She didn't say anything at first, but I could see it happening behind her eyes, like a flicker of realization crossing her face. She was putting it together. She knew Mark had failed to get a room just hours earlier. And yet here I was, effortlessly securing a reservation at the same hotel, at the exact same time. I reached for the champagne, poured 2 glasses and handed one to her. Then I raised mine in a quiet toast. "To the most beautiful woman in the room," I said softly. She held my gaze for a moment too long before clinking her glass against mine. The game wasn't over. But the scoreboard was starting to shift. She smiled across the table, but it wasn't the carefree kind. There was something tight behind it, an undercurrent of tension she couldn't quite hide. Still, as the meal went on, she gradually began to loosen up. The oysters, the grilled salmon, the fresh salad, the sweet burst of raspberries drizzled with liqueur, it was a sensory experience designed with precision. With each course, her posture softened, her smile lingered longer, her eyes grew less guarded. By the time we left the restaurant and stepped into the cool night air, She slipped her arm around mine and leaned gently against me in the car. Her body language had shifted. She was relaxed, maybe even vulnerable. I kept my eyes on the road, hiding my quiet satisfaction in the darkness. The game wasn't over, not even close, but momentum was starting to tilt in my favor. The mix of oysters, wine, and emotional turbulence seemed to have left her in a unique state, part frustrated, part exhilarated. The perfect blend of longing and confusion. When we got home, I didn't give her time to retreat into herself. I guided her gently upstairs, my voice low, comforting. "Why don't you slip into something comfortable?" I suggested, "and I'll take care of the rest." She nodded, stepping into our bedroom and heading toward the closet. While she was distracted, I quietly ducked into the guest room, checking that everything was just as I had prepared earlier. Soft lighting, candles flickering, sheets freshly changed, the air subtly scented. Everything was ready. When I returned, I found her in the hallway. She'd chosen a black nightgown, delicate, sheer, teasing the line between mystery and allure. It hugged her body in all the right places, revealing just enough, yet holding something back. She met my gaze for a moment, curious but silent. Without a word, I took her hand and led her down the hall to the guest room. Candles cast a warm glow across the room. The bed was turned down, the space quiet and intimate. I leaned in and whispered, "Tonight, you don't need to see anything. Just feel. Just breathe." She tilted her head, intrigued, as I gently placed a soft sleep mask over her eyes. Then, slowly, I helped her onto the bed. My movements were deliberate, unhurried. I waved a small bottle of almond oil beneath her nose and told her to breathe it in. "Let the scent take you somewhere quiet," I murmured. I stepped away to warm a bowl of water with my hands, returning to kneel at the foot of the bed. I began with her feet, pressing, soothing, working the tension away in slow, rhythmic strokes. She let out a soft sound, a relaxed sigh escaping her lips. I moved carefully, up her legs, along her arms, across her shoulders. Every inch of her was treated with intention, with focus. No rush. No demands. Only presence. When I gently turned her over and continued, her body melted into the sheets. Each time she breathed out, I felt her loosen a little more. Every sigh, every shift, was confirmation that I had her attention. Not just her body but her emotions too. She was opening up again, if only momentarily. And then, when our closeness reached its quiet peak, when the energy between us finally broke through the layers of distance, we collapsed together, spent and silent. Eventually, I reached up and removed the sleep mask from her eyes. Her expression was hard to read. She looked either faint from exhaustion or lost in the haze of too many emotions tangled into one moment. I wrapped her in a blanket and carried her back to our bedroom. Neither of us said a word. I gently covered her with a sheet, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead as she slipped into a deep, undisturbed sleep. After a quick sponge bath and a moment alone to gather my thoughts, I returned to bed feeling a quiet satisfaction. Everything that night had unfolded exactly the way I'd planned. Laura and I usually operated on different rhythms. She often slept in while I started the day early, but the next morning was different. I came downstairs and found her already awake, standing at the stove with coffee brewing and breakfast on the table. Her eyes had that sparkle I hadn't seen in a long time. She turned to me with a soft smile. "Thank you for last night," she said. "It was beautiful." I smiled back, keeping my expression warm. "I'm glad you enjoyed it," I replied. "It's something I'll remember for a long time." And in that moment I felt something shift. A subtle but undeniable current of change. It felt like I was finally breaking through the fog, like she was seeing me again, maybe even remembering who we used to be. But the illusion didn't last long. Later that afternoon I checked her forwarded emails, routine by now, and what I saw confirmed everything I feared. Mark was still pursuing her. He had emailed, still reeling from the Hyatt disaster, pretending he was confused about the cancelled reservation. He apologized, tried to downplay it. But what caught my attention wasn't his message, it was hers. She replied, "Maybe it just wasn't meant to be." Those words stopped me cold. She hadn't said, "Let's try again." She hadn't promised anything. It was the first sign of hesitation I'd seen from her. But Mark wasn't about to let go. He doubled down, pushing for a new plan, their lake house. Saturday. Bobby, his wife, would be out of town. No hotel, no bookings, no surprises. "Just us," he wrote, "just a hot, uninterrupted time." And then he added something that burned in the back of my throat. "Mac always plays golf on Saturdays. We'll be fine." He knew my schedule. He was that comfortable. And that's when I knew, this was the turning point. If I let this meeting happen, if I allowed them that time together, all the momentum I'd built would be gone. She'd fall right back into his arms and everything I'd done would unravel. But I couldn't skip my golf outing either. Not without raising questions. Mark was counting on my predictability. Tampering with her car again was out. Too risky. She was already on edge. And Laura could always find another way to get there. No, I needed to create a situation that forced her to change her plans. Something last minute. Something she couldn't ignore. Then it hit me. The idea was simple. Elegant even. All it would take was one carefully placed phone call. The rest of the week I stayed the course. Calm. Steady. Routine. I didn't let on that anything was different. I played my role, bided my time. And on Friday night, while Laura slept peacefully beside me, I got up quietly and made my final preparations. Earlier that night, while Laura slept beside me in the still quiet of our bedroom, I made one final adjustment. Nothing dramatic, just a small swap. I replaced her phone battery with a dead one. Harmless, really. But now, if she wanted to get in touch with Mark, she'd have to use the landline. And the landline? That I could monitor. Saturday morning rolled in gently, sunlight streaming through the blinds. I stayed in bed a little longer than usual, my mind steady. I could hear her moving around upstairs, the faint creak of closet doors, the soft tap of heels on hardwood. When she finally descended the stairs, she wasn't wearing her usual Saturday lounge clothes. No yoga pants. No hoodie. Instead, she appeared dressed to impress. An elegant skirt, a carefully chosen blouse, light makeup. She was trying to look casual, but the effort was unmistakable. She had somewhere to be. And she thought I didn't know. As the minutes ticked by and my usual golf departure time approached, I remained planted on the couch, sipping my coffee, skimming the newspaper. I made no move to leave. No clubs in the trunk. No goodbyes. She paced a little. Checked the clock. Glanced at me. When the hands hit 10, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "Aren't you going to golf today?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but her voice held a sharp edge. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. I rose slowly, hiding the grin tugging at the corners of my mouth, and opened the front door to reveal her sister, Miriam, standing there with a bright, cheerful smile and a weekend bag over her shoulder. "Surprise?" she beamed. Laura blinked, caught completely off guard. I'd arranged for Miriam to visit days earlier. Laura had no clue. They were close, always had been, but distance and schedules meant they rarely saw each other. Now, suddenly, her plans for a secret getaway were crumbling in real time. After a brief moment of stunned silence, Laura's expression shifted. She smiled, genuinely this time, and wrapped her sister in a warm embrace. I saw the flicker of understanding cross her face as she glanced back at me. The realization hit her. That's why I didn't go to golf. She masked her disappointment quickly, turning her full attention to Miriam. I offered a light suggestion that maybe she'd like to freshen up, change into something a little more refined for the day ahead. "You look gorgeous already," I added, "but just in case you want to match the occasion." She laughed, a bit offbeat, but played along and headed to the guest room. A few moments later, I heard a sharp, muffled curse from down the hall. When she returned, her phone was in her hand, blank screen, unresponsive. "It's dead," she muttered, frowning. I tilted my head sympathetically. "That's unfortunate," I said. "You could always use the home phone if it's important." She hesitated, shook her head. "No, it's nothing," she said. And just like that, the window had closed. No call. No message. No escape. The rest of the weekend passed in a kind of quiet domestic bliss. I made sure to keep things light, comfortable, bonding with Miriam, cooking meals, playing board games, sharing stories from when we were younger. Laura stayed present, and though I caught her glancing at the clock a few times, she never found an opening to slip away. When Miriam left Sunday afternoon, her car pulling out of the driveway with a wave, I stood beside Laura and watched her go. She didn't say much. And she didn't check her phone either. Miriam pulled me into a warm hug before turning to Laura with a smile. "You've got a special husband," she said with genuine affection. Laura winced ever so slightly, but quickly covered it with a nod and a forced smile. She said nothing, but the flicker in her eyes said plenty. That night, after Laura had gone to bed, I slipped into the study and reviewed the recording from the landline. Just as I suspected, she'd called Mark early Sunday morning, trying to explain, to salvage something. Her voice was hushed, strained with frustration. She told him about Miriam's unexpected visit, how it had ruined their plans. The disappointment in their exchange was palpable. Neither one had the energy to hide it anymore. By Monday morning, it was clear the seams were splitting wide open. Their emails confirmed what I'd been hoping for. "Mark, are we still meeting this week?" I don't think so, Laura. This is getting too complicated. It's starting to frustrate me. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Besides, she wrote, Mac's been really kind to me lately. I started to feel guilty sneaking around behind his back. I think we need to put an end to this. Mark's reply came quickly, and it lacked the heat or desperation I half expected. Well, I can't say I'm not disappointed. You're still an attractive woman. But maybe it's for the best. I don't want to lose Bobby either. Then he added, I hope we can still be friends. To which Laura responded, of course. We'll stay friends. Just not friends with privileges. That was it. The door had shut. Piece by piece I had dismantled their affair, not with fury but with strategy. Not by exploding the truth, but by letting their own guilt and inconvenience do the work for me. But even though the affair had ended, I knew we weren't finished. There was still one act left to play. That evening Laura came home subdued. Her shoulders were slouched slightly, her steps lacking energy. I noticed the quiet sadness behind her eyes, the same way a person looks when they've lost something they cared about, even if they can't say it out loud. I greeted her with warmth, casual concern. Everything okay? She shrugged. Just a rough day. I nodded, respecting the lie. I let her have the space she needed to mourn the loss of her secret world. She didn't know I already knew what she was grieving. The next night we sat together in the study. She curled up next to me on the sofa, tucking her legs beneath her. I was flipping through a worn copy of Edgar Allan Poe, and she tilted her head toward the cover. What are you reading? The Cask of Amontillado, I replied casually. She furrowed her brow. I don't know that one. I turned the page slowly, my voice steady. It's about trust, and revenge in a way. She looked at me for a long moment. Her voice softened. You've been really kind to me these past few weeks. I feel lucky to have you. Those words landed heavy in the space between us. Her sincerity made something rise in my chest, something close to heartbreak even after everything. I looked over at her just in time to catch it, a flicker of guilt flashing through her eyes. Her lips trembled slightly, her voice no more than a whisper. I really don't deserve you. She turned away, blinking back tears. And in that moment I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, letting the weight of everything we'd both been through fill the silence. I met her gaze squarely, my voice calm but carrying the weight of finality. No, I said, steady and deliberate. No, Laura, I don't deserve you. She blinked, confused by the sudden shift in my tone. Before she could respond, I reached into the desk drawer beside me and retrieved a thick stack of photographs. I dropped them onto her lap without ceremony. At first, she looked down in puzzlement, unsure of what I had given her. But as she flipped through the images, each one capturing moments of her and Mark, hand in hand, entering that motel, smiling in stolen secrecy, the realization hit her all at once. A strangled cry broke from her throat. Oh my God, no Mac, please? She looked up, her face pale, her fingers trembling. But I wasn't finished. Without emotion, I handed her another set of documents, this time legal papers. It's the divorce application, I said quietly. Filed earlier today. Her breath caught. She held the papers as if they were burning her fingers. Isn't there still a way to fix this? I didn't let her finish. No, I said, colder now, sharper. I slid another envelope toward her across the table. And if you're wondering about Mark, here's a copy of the letter I sent to Bobby this evening. It includes the full report from the private investigator. Every detail. She stared at me in disbelief. I also sent a copy to your sister Miriam, I continued, so she understands why I'm ending this marriage. I didn't want her left in the dark. Laura let out a moan, low and broken, and folded in on herself as the sobs began. Her shoulders shook, her hands clutching the papers like they might keep her afloat. I just don't understand, she sobbed. You've been so loving these past few weeks. You've been gentle, kind. How can you be so cruel now? Did none of that mean anything to you? I took a long breath. My voice stayed composed even as something inside me ached. When you started your affair, I said, you put an end to every bit of love I had for you. You killed it. I leaned in slightly, my eyes fixed on hers. I spent these past few weeks ending your relationship with Mark, not out of spite but so you'd know what it felt like to lose something you thought was real. The dinners, the flowers, the rooftop view, the massage, the late-night talks, it was all a reminder of everything you threw away. Her crying deepened into full sobs now, her hands trembling as they gripped the papers, as if clinging to the wreckage of what was once our life together. The truth is, I added, my voice almost a whisper, I wanted you to feel exactly what I felt. To know with perfect clarity what you lost. She collapsed back onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, her body racked with sobs that sounded more hollow than human. I stood silently, unmoving. Then, with no further words, I placed my book, the same Poe collection I had been reading, on top of the stack of documents. The pages were left open to the cask of Amontillado. A single line had been carefully highlighted in dark ink. Nemo me impune laces sit. The Montresor family motto. No one dishonors me with impunity.